The morning sun rose over the crystal cities of Cathera like it had for 10,000 years. Belthari walked through her garden, watching the blue flowers sway in the gentle breeze. She was old now, her silver skin wrinkled with age, but her mind was still sharp. As the chief scientist of her people, she spent her days studying the stars and wondering what other life might exist out there. The Villani had always been a peaceful race. They built beautiful cities that reached toward the sky. Their technology could heal diseases and grow food from nothing. They created art that made people cry with joy. War was something they read about in old books, something their ancestors had left behind long ago. That morning, everything changed. The first ships appeared as tiny dots in the sky. Belthari was in her laboratory when her assistant, a young Villani named Kolan, burst through the door. His normally calm face was twisted with fear. "Elder Belthari," he gasped. "The defense stations are reporting unknown ships entering our system. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands." Belthari set down her work and walked to the great window that looked out over their capital city. In the distance, she could see the first explosions. Bright flashes of light erupted from their orbital defense platforms. But the lights were wrong. Instead of the blue energy of Villani weapons, she saw red fire. Their defenses were being destroyed, not firing back. "Who are they?" she asked. "The communication arrays caught some of their signals," Kolan said, his voice shaking. "They call themselves the Thakran Empire. They sent us a message." He handed her a small device. When she pressed it, a harsh voice filled the room. The language was translated by their computers, but the meaning was clear and terrible. "People of this world, you now belong to the Thakran Empire. Your cities, your resources, your lives are ours. Those who surrender will become our workers. Those who resist will die. You have one day to decide." Belthari felt her heart grow cold. She had studied many alien races through their long-range sensors. But the Thakrans were different. They were conquerors. They took worlds not because they needed them, but because they could. Their empire stretched across 40 star systems, and they had never lost a war. The attacks began that very day. The Thakran ships were massive, dark things that blocked out the sun. They moved like predators, circling the planet before striking. Their weapons were not meant to destroy cities cleanly. They were meant to cause fear. The first target was the military command center. Belthari watched from her laboratory as beams of red energy tore through the building where their generals worked. The structure, built to last forever, crumbled like sand. Everyone inside died in seconds. Next came the spaceports. The Thakrans did not want the Villani to escape. They destroyed every ship that tried to leave the planet. Belthari saw civilian transports full of families explode in bright flowers of fire. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never see another sunset. The Villani military tried to fight back, but they were not built for war. Their weapons were designed for hunting dangerous animals or clearing rocks from mining sites. The soldiers were brave, but they had never faced an enemy that wanted to kill them. Most of their defensive positions fell within hours. By the second day, the Thakrans had landed ground forces. Belthari could hear the sounds of battle growing closer to the city center. The invaders moved through the streets in heavy armor, their weapons burning through walls and barriers like they were made of paper. The worst part was not the destruction. It was what happened to the people they captured. The Thakrans needed workers for their mines and factories. They took anyone who was young and strong. Families were torn apart. Children were separated from their parents. The elderly and sick were simply left to die. Belthari tried to help organize the defense of the science district, but it was hopeless. The Thakran soldiers were bigger and stronger than any Villani. Their armor made them look like metal monsters. Worst of all, they seemed to enjoy the fear in people's eyes. On the third day, Kolan came to her with terrible news. "Elder, the government center has fallen. The Council of Elders is dead. The military command is gone. We have no leaders left." Belthari looked out at her burning city. Smoke rose from 100 fires. Bodies lay in the streets. The beautiful crystal towers that had stood for centuries were cracked and broken. Her people were dying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But then she remembered something. Years ago, she had helped build the most powerful communication system their world had ever known. It could send messages across the entire galaxy. They had built it to contact other peaceful races, to share knowledge and make friends among the stars. "Kolan," she said, "is the deep space communication array still working?" "I think so, Elder." It was built underground, away from the cities. Then we still have hope. That night, Velthari and a small group of survivors made their way through the ruined city. They moved carefully, hiding from Thakran patrols. The invaders had set up checkpoints everywhere, but they did not know the old tunnel systems beneath the city. It took them 6 hours to reach the communication facility. The building was damaged, but still standing. Most importantly, the great transmitter was still working. Velthari's hand shook as she powered up the systems. She looked at the others who had made this dangerous journey with her. Young and old, male and female, all looking at her with desperate hope in their eyes. She was their last chance. Velthari began to record her message. She spoke in the common galactic language that most races understood. Her voice was calm, but inside her heart was breaking. To anyone who can hear this transmission across the galaxy, this is Elder Velthari of the Villani people on the world of Cathara. We are under attack by the Thakran Empire. Our military is destroyed. Our government is gone. Our people are dying or being taken as slaves. She paused, looking out at the fires still burning in her city. We have never harmed anyone. We are a peaceful people who only wanted to live in harmony with the universe. But now we face extinction. In 2 days, maybe 3, there will be no more Villani. Our children will grow up as slaves if they grow up at all. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. We offer everything we have to anyone who will help us. Our technology, our resources, our knowledge of the stars. We will serve you faithfully if you will just save our people. Please, if there is anyone out there who believes that innocent lives matter, help us. Time is running out. She sent the message out on all frequencies, broadcasting it to every corner of the galaxy. Then she collapsed into her chair, exhausted and heartbroken. They had done all they could. Now they could only wait and pray that someone, somewhere, would care enough to answer. Far away, on a small blue world that most of the galaxy feared to approach, a human named Commander Dongmin received the message. He listened to every word, watched the footage of the burning cities and the frightened refugees. When it was over, he sat in silence for a long moment. Then he reached for his communication device and sent a priority message to Earth Command. His message was short and simple: deploy the legions. The message from Commander Dongmin reached Earth at 0600 hours Seoul time. It went straight to the desk of General Park Hee-jin, the woman who commanded Earth's military forces. She was drinking her morning coffee when the communication came through. By the time she finished reading it, the coffee had gone cold. General Park had seen many terrible things in her 40 years of service. Earth was not a kind world. It had tried to kill humans with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and storms that could level cities. Humans had survived by becoming tough, by learning to fight back against a planet that wanted them dead. But they had also learned something else that many races never understood. They had learned to protect those who could not protect themselves. She called her aide, a young captain named Yoon Ji-woo. Get me the War Council, emergency session, and send word to all Legion commanders. Full mobilization order. Within an hour, the most important military leaders on Earth were gathered in the command center deep beneath Seoul. The room was simple and practical, like everything humans built. No fancy decorations, no gold or jewels. Just efficient design that worked when it needed to work. Colonel Nam Suho was the first to arrive. He commanded the 1st Orbital Drop Division, the soldiers who fell from space onto enemy worlds like meteors. He was a big man with scars on his hands and a calm way of speaking that made people trust him. His soldiers would follow him into hell if he asked them to. Captain Yoon Ji-woo came next, bringing data files about the Thakran Empire. She was young for her rank, but she had earned it fighting pirates in the outer systems. Her ships were fast and deadly, built to strike hard and disappear before the enemy could respond. Major Lee Taemin arrived last. He looked like a teacher or a scientist, not a soldier. That was because his job was different from the others. He was in charge of psychological warfare, the art of breaking an enemy's will to fight. He knew that sometimes the right words at the right time could end a war faster than the biggest guns. General Park stood at the head of the table and activated the holographic display. The image of the Thakran Empire filled the room. 40 star systems, thousands of ships, billions of soldiers. It was the kind of empire that had conquered entire sections of the galaxy. 3 days ago, the Thakran Empire invaded a peaceful world called Cathara. She began. The people there sent out a distress call. They're asking for help. Colonel Nam studied the tactical data. General, with respect, the numbers don't look good. The Thakrans have 3,000 ships in that system alone. We can maybe field 50 ships without leaving Earth defenseless. Their soldiers are bigger and stronger than humans, Captain Yoon added. They've been conquering worlds for 200 years. They've never lost a war. General Park nodded. She had expected these concerns. You're right. By every measure that matters to most species, this is suicide. But we're not most species, are we? She touched a control and the display changed. Now it showed Earth, their small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. To most races, it looked like nothing special. But the classification marker beside it told a different story. Class Tuathine Deathworld. The Volani are dying, General Park said simply. Their children are being taken as slaves. Their cities are burning. They asked for help and no one else answered. That makes it our job. Major Lee leaned forward. What's our objective, General? Are we trying to drive off the Thakrans? Negotiate a withdrawal? Or, General Park's smile was cold as winter. We're going to end this war. Completely. The Thakran Empire has had 40 systems and 200 years to learn that might makes right. Time they learned what happens when they meet someone mightier. She pressed another control. The room filled with new information. Force deployments, ship assignments, supply lines. It was the kind of planning that only came from years of experience and the best military minds on Earth. We're deploying all 8 Deathworld legions, she announced. 60,000 soldiers. Every one of them trained to fight and survive in conditions that would kill most aliens just from exposure. Colonel Nam's eyes widened. All 8 legions? General, that's our entire rapid response force. Yes, it is, and we're going to use every single one of them. General Park touched another control, and the display showed ship deployment plans. Captain Yoon, you'll command the fleet. 47 ships, including the Soul's Vengeance, as your flagship. Captain Yoon studied the force allocation. The ships were smaller than most military vessels, but that was by design. Human ships were built to survive in Earth's gravity well, which was stronger than most worlds. They were also built to operate in the radiation fields around Earth's magnetosphere, which meant they could go places other ships couldn't follow. What about intelligence? Major Lee asked. Do we know how the Thakrans think? What they're afraid of? General Park smiled. They're afraid of losing. They've built their entire empire on the idea that they're the strongest, most dangerous species in the galaxy. They've never met real resistance before. The Volani tried to fight them with police weapons and civilian spacecraft. We're going to show them what a Deathworld species looks like when it's angry. The meeting continued for 3 hours. Every detail was planned, from supply lines to communication protocols. But the most important conversation happened when the formal briefing was over. The 4 officers stood around the holographic display, looking at the image of the Thakran fleet orbiting Cathara. General, Captain Yoon said quietly, there's something I need to ask. When we get there and the shooting starts, what are our rules of engagement? It was a good question. Different species had different ideas about how wars should be fought. Some believed in honor and formal challenges. Others preferred to minimize casualties. Still others fought wars of complete destruction. General Park was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of Earth's history. The Thakrans chose to make war on innocence. They chose to take children from their families. They chose to burn cities full of peaceful people. She looked at each of her officers in turn. We didn't start this war, but we're going to finish it. When someone hurts innocent people, we don't negotiate. We don't compromise. We protect the innocent and we stop the ones doing the hurting. Whatever it takes. Colonel Nam nodded slowly. Understood, General. When do we deploy? Immediately. The Volani have maybe 6 days before their population is completely enslaved or dead. Factor in travel time, and that gives us about 4 days to end this war. As the officers left to prepare their forces, General Park remained behind, staring at the holographic display. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent people were suffering. Their world was burning, their families were being destroyed, and their children were being taken away. But help was coming. Across Earth, the call went out to the Deathworld legions. In the ice cities of Antarctica, soldiers who had trained in temperatures that would freeze most aliens solid checked their cold weather gear. In the deep ocean colonies, fighters who could operate at crushing depths that would implode normal spacecraft prepared their pressure suits. In the volcanic regions near active lava flows, warriors who fought in heat that would melt most metals loaded their thermal-resistant weapons. These were Earth's children, forged by a world that had tried every way possible to kill them and failed. They had learned to fight in gravity that would crush most aliens, in atmospheres that were poison to other species, in radiation that would sterilize most worlds. They were the products of a planet that had made them strong by trying to make them extinct. And now they were going to war. Private Kim Da-hai was in the Arctic training facility when the call came. She had been born in one of the polar cities where the temperature never rose above freezing and the wind could kill you in minutes. She packed her gear with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life. Sergeant Choi Min-ho received his orders in the deep Pacific facility, 3 miles underwater. He had grown up in the ocean cities, where humans lived under pressure that would crush most alien species. His equipment was designed to let him fight in the vacuum of space or the depths of alien oceans. Lieutenant Park So-young got her deployment notice while training in the volcanic fields of Hawaii. She had spent her childhood near active lava flows, in temperatures that would cook most life forms. Her weapons were built to function in the heat of planetary cores. All across Earth, the same scene played out. 60,000 soldiers, each one trained to fight and survive in conditions that other species considered impossible. They were the children of a death world, and they were ready to show the galaxy what that meant. In 6 hours, the first ships began launching from Earth's orbital facilities. They looked small compared to the massive battlecruisers that most empires preferred. But size could be deceiving. These ships were built by a species that had learned to survive on a world that killed most, things that tried to live there. The Thakran Empire was about to discover why Earth was marked on every star chart with a simple warning: here there be humans. Admiral Krextor stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Fist, watching the final stages of Cathara's conquest. Below him, the planet's surface was marked with the scars of battle. Burning cities sent pillars of smoke into the atmosphere. The crystal towers that had once made this world beautiful now lay in broken pieces. He was satisfied with the progress. The Villani had been even weaker than expected. Their military had collapsed in less than 2 days. Now his ground forces were rounding up the survivors, sorting the useful ones from those who would only consume resources. The strong would work in the Empire's mines and factories. The weak would be left to die. It was efficient and practical. Krextor was a large creature even by Thakran standards. His thick armor plating was marked with the scars of dozens of conquests. His forearms could crush a human skull without effort. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived, and they had brought that philosophy to the stars. Might made right. The weak existed to serve the strong. Admiral, his communications officer called from across the bridge. We're receiving multiple reports from our scout ships. Unknown vessels are approaching the system. Krextor barely looked up from his tactical displays. After 200 years of conquest, the pattern was always the same. When the Thakran Empire moved against a world, other species sometimes showed up hoping to claim scraps from the victory. Pirates mostly, or small governments looking for easy salvage. How many ships? He asked. The scouts report 47 vessels, Admiral. Configuration unknown. They're still several hours out. Krextor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. His fleet numbered over 3,000 ships, from massive battle cruisers to fast attack craft. Whatever these newcomers were, they would either flee when they saw his strength or be destroyed when they tried to interfere. Keep monitoring them, he ordered. If they get too close, send a squadron to drive them off. Down on Cathara's surface, the work continued. Thakran soldiers moved through the refugee camps, selecting prisoners for transport to the slave ships. The process was brutal but efficient. Families were separated without thought or care. Children were torn from their parents' arms. The elderly and sick were simply left behind to die. In one of the camps, Velthari huddled with a group of other survivors. The great scientist who had once studied the stars was now just another refugee, her clothes torn and dirty, her silver skin marked with cuts and bruises. She had been captured 2 days after sending her distress call. Since then, she had watched her people being herded like animals. Elder Velthari whispered a young Villani beside her. Did anyone answer your message? Is help coming? Velthari looked up at the sky, where Thakran ships moved like dark clouds against the stars. I don't know, child, I hope so. But we may be on our own. She tried to sound brave for the others, but inside her heart was breaking. The galaxy was a big place, and most species had learned to fear the Thakran Empire. Even if someone had received her message, what could they do against such overwhelming force? Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Captain Yoon Ji-woo stood on the bridge of the Soul's Vengeance. Her ship was the lead vessel in a formation that looked tiny compared to the Thakran armada ahead. But appearances could be deceiving. "Captain," her sensor officer reported, "we're picking up detailed scans of the Thakran fleet. 3,047 ships ranging from destroyer class to dreadnought class. They're in standard occupation formation around the planet." Captain Yoon studied the tactical display. The Thakran ships were arranged in a pattern that made sense for occupying a conquered world. Strong defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, escape routes secured. It was textbook fleet deployment for a successful invasion. It was also exactly what her people had hoped to see. "Any sign they've detected us yet?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. We're still running silent, and their sensor sweeps are focused on the planet, not the outer system approaches." Perfect. The Thakrans were so confident in their victory that they weren't even watching for threats. Captain Yoon activated her communication system, opening a secure channel to all ships in her fleet. "All vessels, this is Captain Yoon. We're approaching the target system. Remember, we're not here to fight a war. We're here to end one, fast, brutal, and decisive. The Villani have suffered enough." Around her, the bridge crew prepared for battle. These were not the massive crews that most alien species required. Human ships were designed for small, efficient teams. Every person on the bridge had trained for years to do their job under conditions that would kill most aliens. They had practiced fighting in crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, and radiation fields that would sterilize other worlds. Lieutenant Ko Jae-sung, her tactical officer, looked up from his displays. "Captain, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the Thakran ships. Their weapon systems are different from anything in our database. Better or worse than expected? Different. They rely heavily on thermal beam weapons and kinetic projectiles. Very effective against most species, but..." He paused, running calculations. "Captain, I don't think they've ever fought anyone like us before." Captain Yoon smiled grimly. That was exactly what she had hoped to hear. The Thakran Empire had built its reputation fighting species that had evolved on comfortable worlds. They had conquered races that preferred negotiation to violence, that tried to minimize casualties even in war. They had never faced a species that had learned to fight on a world that was actively trying to kill them. "All ships prepare for combat deployment," she announced. "Remember, these are not soldiers defending their homes. These are invaders who chose to make war on innocents. Show them what that choice costs." Back on the Thakran flagship, Admiral Krextor was reviewing casualty reports from the ground forces when his communications officer called out again. "Admiral, the unknown fleet is still approaching. They're not responding to our standard warning broadcasts." Krextor sighed with annoyance. Sometimes the smaller species needed to be taught their place more directly. "Send them a proper warning. Tell them this system belongs to the Thakran Empire now. They can leave or they can join the wreckage on the planet below." "Yes, Admiral. Transmitting now." The message went out on all standard frequencies in the common galactic language that most species understood. It was the same warning the Thakrans had given to hundreds of other fleets over the years. Usually it was enough to send potential scavengers fleeing back to whatever hole they had crawled out of. This time, something different happened. The response came back on the same frequency, clear and strong. The voice was female, speaking in accented but perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Yoon Ji-woo of the Earth Defense Force. We have received a distress call from the people of this world. You have committed acts of genocide against a peaceful population. Surrender now and prepare to face judgment for your crimes, or face the consequences of making an enemy of Earth." The bridge of the Dominion's fist fell silent. For a moment nobody moved. Then Admiral Krextor began to laugh. "Earth?" he gasped between laughs. "That quarantined Deathworld in the Outer Rim? Those primitive savages think they can threaten the Thakran Empire?" His laughter was infectious. Soon the entire bridge crew was laughing with him. Earth was a legend among spacefaring species, but not the kind of legend that inspired respect. It was the kind of legend that made people shake their heads and wonder how any intelligent life could have evolved on such a hostile world. "Admiral," his tactical officer said when the laughter died down, "should we respond?" "Oh yes," Krextor said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Send them a message they'll understand. Tell them that the Thakran Empire does not negotiate with prey animals from Deathworlds. Tell them they have one chance to flee before we add their ships to our collection." The message was sent, broadcast on all frequencies, so that any ships in the system could hear it. Admiral Krextor expected the human fleet to turn around and run. Most species did when they realized what they were facing. Instead, he got a response that made him stop laughing. "Prey animals." Captain Yoon's voice came back, calm and steady. "That's an interesting choice of words from someone who preys on innocence. You're about to learn the difference between prey and predator, Admiral. Consider this your only warning." Admiral Krextor's amusement turned to anger. No one spoke to the Thakran Empire that way. No one threatened his forces and lived to tell about it. He turned to his fleet commander. "Deploy attack squadrons. 50 ships should be more than enough to deal with these upstart humans. Destroy them all. Leave no survivors." "Yes, Admiral." Squadrons 7 through 12. Prepare for combat deployment. But even as his orders went out, Admiral Krextor felt the first stirring of something he had not experienced in many years. It was not fear, not yet. But it was uncertainty. The humans had not sounded afraid when they issued their warning. They had sounded confident. That should not have been possible. His fleet was 70 times larger than theirs. His ships were bigger, his weapons more powerful, his soldiers more experienced. By every logical measure, this should have been a massacre in his favor. So why did the humans sound like they expected to win? The first shots were fired by the Thakrans. 50 of their best warships moved toward the small human fleet like a pack of hunters closing on wounded prey. Their weapons lit up the darkness of space with beams of red energy that could cut through the armor of most alien ships like paper. Captain Yoon watched the attack, coming on her displays, and felt a cold calm settle over her. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Every human military officer learned the same lesson early in their career. Earth was a world that tried to kill you every day, and the only way to survive was to be tougher, smarter, and more determined than whatever was trying to destroy you. "All ships, execute combat deployment pattern Alpha," she commanded. "Remember, we are not here to win glory. We are here to save lives." What happened next was not what Admiral Krextor expected. Instead of forming up in traditional battle lines like every civilized species did, the human ships simply disappeared. Their formations scattered in all directions, each ship moving on what looked like a completely random course. Some dove toward the planet's gravity well, others slingshot around the system's moons. A few actually headed directly into the radiation field surrounding the gas giant that orbited near the edge of the system. "What are they doing?" Admiral Krextor demanded from his command bridge. "Are they running?" His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with confusion. "I don't think so, Admiral. They're not heading for the jump points. They're just spreading out. Then they're making it easy for us. Signal all squadrons to pursue and destroy. Don't let a single human ship escape." But as the Thakran attack squadrons moved to engage, they discovered that hunting humans was not as simple as it looked. The human ships were small and fast, but more than that, they were doing things that no sane species would attempt. One human vessel, the destroyer Busan's Thunder, dove directly into the gravity shadow of Cathara's largest moon. The Thakran ships following it had to slow down and adjust course to avoid being pulled into a crash trajectory. By the time they corrected, the human ship had used the moon's gravity to slingshot itself into a completely different vector, coming up behind them with all weapons firing. Another ship, the cruiser Inchun's Blade, actually entered the radiation belt around the gas giant. The Thakran ships following it had to pull back. The radiation levels would have killed their crews within minutes. But somehow the human ship continued to operate in conditions that should have sterilized everything aboard. "How are they doing this?" Krextor roared. "No one can fight in those radiation fields." "Sir," his science officer reported nervously, "our analysis suggests the human ships are heavily shielded against radiation, much more than should be necessary for normal operations." What the Thakrans didn't understand was that human ships were not designed for normal operations. They were built by a species that lived on a world with a magnetic field that created radiation belts, worse than anything around most gas giants. Human crews trained in conditions that would kill most aliens just from exposure. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Thakran Empire had ever experienced. The humans didn't fight like any civilized species. They used gravity wells as weapons, radiation fields as hiding places, and asteroid fields as cover. They operated in the dark spaces between planets where most ships would be blind and helpless. Worse, their ships seemed to be designed for this kind of fighting. When Thakran thermal beams struck human vessels, The energy was absorbed by armor that had been designed to handle the heat of re-entry through Earth's thick atmosphere. When kinetic projectiles hit human ships, they bounced off hulls that were built to survive the crushing pressure of Earth's deep ocean trenches. But the real shock came when the humans went on the attack. Captain Yoon's flagship, the Soul's Vengeance, came screaming out of the shadow of an asteroid, moving faster than should have been possible for a ship of its size. Its weapons were not the elegant energy beams that most species preferred. They were crude, brutal things that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. The first Thakran ship in its path, a heavy cruiser called the Conqueror's Pride, took a direct hit from what humans called a railgun. The projectile was just a piece of dense metal, but it was moving at a significant fraction of light speed. When it hit the Thakran ship's shields, it punched through them like they weren't there. When it hit the armor, it went through that too. When it hit the ship's reactor core, the Conqueror's Pride simply disappeared in a ball of white fire. Impossible, Admiral Krextor shouted. No weapon should have penetrated those shields. But even as he spoke, more human ships were emerging from impossible positions. They came from behind moons, out of radiation shadows, up from gravity wells where no ship should have been able to operate. And they were all firing those terrible kinetic weapons. The Thakrans had built their empire using advanced energy weapons and sophisticated tactics. But the humans fought like their homeworld had taught them to fight, with brutal efficiency and whatever tools worked best. If a simple chunk of metal moving very fast could destroy an enemy ship, then that was what they used. Within 20 minutes, half of Admiral Krextor's attack squadrons had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were retreating in confusion, trying to regroup and figure out what they were fighting. But the humans weren't done. As the space battle raged overhead, something else began happening. Small objects started falling from the human ships toward Cathara's surface. At first, the Thakran ground commanders thought they were missiles or bombs. They were wrong. They were drop pods. Colonel Nam Suho felt the familiar sensation of orbital insertion as his pod screamed through Cathara's atmosphere. Around him, 1,000 other pods were making the same journey, each one carrying a single human soldier equipped for war. The Thakrans had never seen anything like it. Most civilized species moved their ground forces in large transport ships that landed at designated zones. The idea of dropping individual soldiers from orbit like meteors was insane. The stress would kill most aliens and the accuracy would be terrible. But humans had learned to do many things that other species considered impossible. Colonel Nam's pod hit the ground outside the main Thakran base at exactly the coordinates he had planned. His armor absorbed the impact that would have turned most alien bones to powder. His weapons were already charged and ready before he even climbed out of the smoking crater his landing had made. All around the planet, the same scene was repeated. Human soldiers dropped from the sky like falling stars, landing exactly where they needed to be. Some landed in the middle of Thakran bases. Others landed near the refugee camps where Villani civilians were being held. A few landed in the most dangerous places of all, the areas where Thakran forces were torturing or executing prisoners. Private Kim Dahai landed outside a prison camp in the planet's polar region. The temperature was far below freezing, cold enough to kill most species in minutes, but she had grown up in Earth's polar cities where this was considered a warm day. Her breath didn't even fog as she checked her weapons and began moving toward the camp perimeter. The Thakran guards had never seen anything like her. She moved through the snow like a ghost, invisible against the white landscape. Her weapons were designed to function in temperatures that would make most alien technology useless. When she opened fire, the Thakran soldiers didn't even have time to sound an alarm. Sergeant Choi Minho had drawn an assignment at the opposite extreme. His drop pod landed in a swamp near the equator, where the heat and humidity were crushing. The air was so thick with moisture that most species would drown just from breathing. But he had grown up in Earth's deep ocean colonies, where the pressure was worse and the air was recycled through systems that most aliens couldn't even understand. He moved through the swamp like he was born there, using the dense vegetation for cover. The Thakran patrol base he was assigned to attack was built on a platform above the water, surrounded by sensors and automated defenses. It should have been impregnable, but the Thakrans had never fought anyone who could approach underwater, breathing through equipment that functioned at depths that would crush most ships. Sergeant Choi came up through the platform's drainage system, emerging in the middle of the command center like something from the Thakrans' worst nightmares. All across Cathara, The pattern was repeated. Human soldiers appeared in places where no civilized species could survive, doing things that should have been impossible. They fought in toxic atmospheres that would poison most aliens. They operated in gravity fields that would crush most bones. They moved through radiation zones that would kill most life forms in minutes. The Thakrans had built their empire by being the strongest and most dangerous species they had ever met. But they had never met the children of a death world. They had never fought creatures that had been forged by a planet that tried every day to kill them and failed. Back in space, Admiral Krextor watched his fleet falling apart and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. Real, honest fear. Status report. He demanded. Admiral, we've lost 67 ships in the past hour. Ground forces are reporting attacks from impossible positions. We're taking casualties faster than we can count them. How many humans are there? 18 hours after the first shots were fired, the war was over. Admiral Krextor sat in the emergency shelter deep inside his flagship, staring at reports that told a story he could barely believe. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Thakran Empire, was scattered wreckage floating in space around Cathara. Of the 3,000 ships that had begun this battle, fewer than 200 were still capable of fighting. The rest were either destroyed or so badly damaged that their crews had abandoned them. On the planet below, the situation was even worse. His ground forces, millions of hardened warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, were in full retreat. They fled not from an overwhelming enemy army, but from small groups of humans who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. Soldiers who had never known fear were abandoning their posts, rather than face the terrifying creatures from the Deathworld. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, the humans are demanding our surrender. Krextor laughed bitterly. Surrender. The Thakran Empire had never surrendered to anyone. But then again, they had never fought anyone like the humans. Put them through, he said. The holographic display activated, showing the bridge of a human ship. The woman standing at its center was small by Thakran standards, barely coming up to his chest if they were standing in the same room. But there was something in her eyes that made him want to take a step backward. I am General Park Hae-jin of the Earth Defense Force, she said calmly. You will order your remaining forces to stand down immediately. Any ship that continues to fire on our forces will be destroyed. Any ground unit that harms civilian prisoners will be eliminated. You think you have won? Krextor snarled, trying to project the strength that had carried him through 40 years of conquest. We still have hundreds of ships, millions of ground troops. This war is far from over. General Park's expression didn't change. Admiral, in the past 18 hours, my forces have destroyed 85% of your fleet and routed your ground forces on 17 different continents. Your supply lines are cut. Your communication networks are down and your soldiers are deserting faster than you can count them. This war ended the moment you decided to prey on innocents. We're just here to explain the consequences. Behind her, Krextor could see other humans moving efficiently around their bridge. They looked calm, professional, like they were handling a routine training exercise rather than the destruction of one of the galaxy's most feared empires. What do you want? He asked. Your unconditional surrender, General Park replied. Full withdrawal from this system. Release of all prisoners. Reparations for the damage you have caused. And a promise that the Thakran Empire will never again attack a peaceful world. Krextor's pride wanted to refuse, to fight to the last ship and the last soldier, but he was not stupid. He could see the tactical displays. He knew what the humans had done to his forces. If this continued, the Thakran Empire would not just lose this battle, it would cease to exist. And if I refuse? General Park's smile was colder than the vacuum of space. Then we will continue this conversation until there are no Thakrans left to have it with. It was not a bluff. Krextor could hear it in her voice, see it in the way her officers stood ready at their stations. These humans had crossed the galaxy to save people they had never met. They would not hesitate to destroy an empire that stood in their way. I surrender, he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Down on Cathara's surface, Velthari stood in what had been a Thakran prison camp just hours before. The walls had been torn down, not by explosives or heavy weapons, but by human soldiers using tools that looked like they belonged in construction work rather than warfare. She watched in amazement as the humans moved through the camp, treating wounded Villani with medical equipment that seemed far more advanced than their brutal weapons. The same soldiers who had destroyed the Thakran Empire with terrifying efficiency were now gently helping children find their parents and distributing food to hungry refugees. A human soldier approached her. He was a big man with kind eyes and scars on his hands. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Elder Velthari, I am Major Lee Taman. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Velthari looked up at him in wonder. You know my name. You sent the message that brought us here," Major Lee said simply. "We came as fast as we could." "I'm sorry we weren't faster." Tears ran down Velthari's silver cheeks. "I don't understand. Your people, you destroyed the Thakran Empire in less than a day. You're clearly warriors, fighters. Why do you treat us with such kindness?" Major Lee was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Around them, other humans continued their work, reuniting families and providing aid to anyone who needed it. Finally he spoke. "Our world tried to kill us," he said. "Every day for millions of years, Earth threw everything it had at us. Ice ages, volcanoes, earthquakes, storms that could level cities. Most life on our world died. We survived." He gestured toward his fellow soldiers. "But surviving wasn't enough. We learned that the strong must protect the weak, that those who can fight have a duty to defend those who cannot. That's not just our military code, it's who we are as a people." Velthari watched a human medic gently treating a wounded Villani child, using equipment that could probably heal injuries that would be fatal with Villani medicine. "But you're so powerful, so dangerous. You could rule the galaxy if you wanted to." Major Lee shook his head. "Rule? No, that's what the Thakrans tried to do. We don't want to rule anyone. We want to protect people, to help them build better lives, to make sure that children can grow up safe and free. But why? What do you gain from it?" The human smiled, and for a moment he looked not like a terrifying warrior but like a teacher or a father. "We gain the knowledge that we used our strength for the right purpose, that we were worthy of the power our world gave us." 3 days later, the last Thakran ships jumped out of the Cathara system. They left behind a world that was damaged but not destroyed, a people who were hurt but not broken. More importantly, they left behind a message that would spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The message was simple: Earth protects. Other worlds that suffered under cruel empires began to hope. Species that had been conquered or enslaved started to believe that freedom was possible. And in the dark corners of space where tyrants plotted and conquerors planned their next campaigns, a new fear was born, the fear of making an enemy of the humans. General Park stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching Cathara turn slowly beneath them. The planet's scars were healing. New construction was already beginning in the damaged cities. The Villani were a resilient people, and with human aid they would rebuild stronger than before. Captain Yoon approached, carrying a data pad with their next orders. "General, we're receiving reports from 17 other systems. Request for assistance. Distress calls." General Park took the pad and reviewed the reports. Worlds under attack, people crying for help, innocent lives hanging in the balance. It was the same story that had brought them to Cathara, repeated across the galaxy. "Recommendations, Captain? The 3rd and 7th Legions are already en route to the Kalos system. The 5th Legion is preparing for deployment to Nexus Prime. We have requests for aid from civilizations we've never even heard of before." General Park nodded. Word was spreading. The galaxy was learning that there was a species willing to fight for others, to cross vast distances to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. "What about the Thakrans? Will they try again?" Captain Yoon smiled grimly. "Intelligence reports suggest the Thakran Empire is in complete chaos. Half their fleet is destroyed, their ground forces are demoralized, and their subject worlds are in open rebellion. They'll be too busy trying to hold their empire together to bother anyone else for a long time." "Good." General Park looked out at the stars, each one representing solar systems where people lived and worked and raised their children. Some of those people were safe. Others were not. But now they all knew that help could come from an unlikely source. A small blue world on the edge of the galaxy where the children of a Deathworld had learned to be guardians. She activated the ship's communication system, sending a message back to Earth Command. Her words would be recorded in the archives, studied by future generations of soldiers and diplomats and leaders. Mission accomplished. Cathara is secure. The Thakran threat has been neutralized. Civilian casualties were minimized. We are establishing humanitarian aid stations and will remain in system until local authority is restored. She paused, thinking of all the other messages like this that would be sent in the coming years, all the other worlds that would be saved, all the other tyrants that would be stopped. The galaxy now knows what it means to make an enemy of Earth. More importantly, it knows what it means to be a friend of humanity. We are the children of the Deathworld, and we remember our friends. On worlds throughout the galaxy, the message was received and understood. Earth protects. The humans were listening. And in the dark spaces between the stars, evil had learned to be afraid. Velthari stood in her rebuilt laboratory, looking up at the stars through a new telescope that human engineers had helped her construct.